there's one universal equation. Customers are just looking for companies and products which are better, faster, and competitive. In its pricing. And I say not necessarily cheaper but competitive, because there is a quality value equation in there. But that's what they're looking for. And I think your reputation plays a very important role as you start getting into some of these overseas markets.
Founded in 1958, APAR Industries has played an integral role in the electrical industry in India. Today, the company is a giant in its space, with 3 business verticals and revenues in excess of 14,000 crore rupees. In this episode of the Sensei Kujaku show, Kushal Desai, Chairman and Managing Director of APAR Industries, discusses various aspects of the business, including the emphasis laid on technology from day one, the importance of scale, and the crucial role the company plays in enabling key sectors of the global economy. Mr. Desai also describes the enormous impact of his father, Dr. N Desai, and recounts the remarkable story of Dr. Desai's contribution to man walking on the moon. Go ahead and press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on business, investing, and entrepreneurship. Hi Kushal Bhai, thank you so much for taking the time. Welcome to the Sensei Kujaku show.
Most welcome, Krish. Happy to be here.
So, Kushal Bhai, there's a lot of really interesting components to your business. But in some ways, probably the most interesting thing is actually the people leading the organization. You are the 3rd generation that's in the business. What I want to understand is the importance that sound technical grounding and knowledge has played in the development of APAR, and how the company has been influenced by the fact that the leaders through the generations have a very strong background in engineering. I want to understand how that has influenced the business and led you to where you are today.
So actually, APAR's businesses are building blocks essentially for infrastructure, and particularly power infrastructure. So we have a overhead transmission line business, overhead conductors. We're one of the largest players in the world in that. We have a specialty oil business, of which the largest component is transformer oil, which again is connected to the electrical industry. It's a critical raw material or a component that goes into a transformer, which in turn goes into a substation. And then we have a wire and cable business. So by its very nature, it's quite electrical. So we've always been an engineering-led company. So it was founded by my grandfather. He had a mechanical and electrical engineering degree. My father took over from him after working in the business for almost 25 odd years. And he is a PhD in electrical engineering. And then Chaitanya and me are both engineers. I'm an electrical engineer, Chaitanya is a chemical engineer. The motto of our company is tomorrow's solutions today. And the way in which APAR has grown is that we've been very focused on the product lines which we have, but we've wanted to be world leaders in those product lines, to provide customers a solution to their problems, difficulties, needs, or aspirations, as the case may be. And so as a consequence, at least up to this stage, having senior management and business leaders who are very technologically focused has really allowed APAR to grow. You do need, today to shop technology in some of these areas is not easy, because our main competition is companies out of Japan, Korea, United States, especially at the high end of the spectrum, or from the Middle East, where they've paid tons of money to get the technology. So in our case, each of the businesses has an R&D center, and all of them are DSIR approved, Department of Science and Industrial Research. And we focused in terms of developing all these products and own our own IP. And the advantage of owning your own IP is that then the world is your market. You don't have restrictions in terms of where you can sell. The moment you buy technology, it comes with strings attached. So I think so far the development of APAR has progressed at this pace because of a major technology focus and a technology edge. Having said that, going forward, now that the company has grown to a certain size, it's possible now to bring in people. In fact, we've always had good people, but the size and the budgets that you have, spending on R&D, the scale that you have, you can afford and bring in the best, technology talent.
Yeah.
So I think it's been very important so far, but going forward, I think we can have a broader base. It doesn't have to be a family-led person.
So that's actually really interesting. You bring up 2-3 really interesting points, and I want to get into each of those. One of which is competing globally. Right. But before we get into any of that, you brought up your father, Dr. Desai, and you spoke about his PhD. There's an interesting story, and I'm not sure how true it is and how much of it is legend, but he played a role in actually putting a man on the moon and getting him back. Is that true?
So, well, when my father was doing his PhD at Penn, part of that PhD, so there were 150 engineers who were involved in one aspect. It was a very complex thing, and there was this big race going on between Russia and the United States. So they had thousands of engineers working on various aspects. So there was a team of 150 engineers, of which I believe 5 or 6 were from Penn, from the electrical engineering, the Moore School of Electrical Engineering at Penn, who were involved in the trajectory of the space shuttle to get to the moon, and then getting the shuttle off, from the moon back into the orbit. So he was one of the members of that team, and in fact, it was very mathematical from what I understand, from him. That's one of the reasons why his thesis advisor was very keen that he be there, because he was very good in math. But it was a fast track PhD, because typically these PhDs take 3-4 years. And in this case, he got his PhD in just a little over a year and a half, because it had such a tight timeline.
That's incredible, actually. But so I want to come back to the business now. You spoke about competing globally, and like you said, the minute you're competing globally, you're competing against the best, and often you're competing in their home markets.
Absolutely.
So I want to understand 2 aspects of this. One is, the first and foremost, I want to understand, how do you think you compete effectively globally? Like I was saying that, for example, if you are the away team in some sense, right, how do you compete with them? Because like the way India is Atmanirbhar, I'm sure a lot of countries have their own desire to promote their own local companies. So what do you think has worked for you to win contracts in other countries?
So I think there's one universal equation. Customers are just looking for companies and products which are better, faster, and competitive. In its pricing. And I say not necessarily cheaper, but competitive, because there is a quality value equation in there. But that's what they're looking for. And I think your reputation plays a very important role as you start getting into some of these overseas markets. Because unlike in India, where there is too much emphasis on whoever is the cheapest, I think the equation in a lot of particularly developed markets, other aspects are also taken care of and are in fact given significant emphasis, which is timely delivery, high level of reliability, on delivering product on time, making sure product is delivered on spec. Because in many of these countries, the fixed costs, cost of not getting it right the first time is very high. So they lay a lot of emphasis on these things. So once you've developed your business and the customer has a level of trust, which is based on your reputation and on the track record that you have, it's really possible for you to compete anywhere in the world.
Yeah. And another important component of this is the scale. Obviously, in a lot of products, while cost may not be the only consideration, it's obviously a consideration.
No, it's a very important consideration.
Yeah, and so how important do you think scale has been in allowing you to compete globally?
It's very important, because as I said, there's better, faster, cheaper / competitive, and scale helps you get there. Secondly, in the last 10-15 years, you typically hear of innovation that's happening in software and chat GPT and AI and generative AI and all that sort of stuff. But, I've been around for now 34 years. And in the last 10 years, the amount of change and technology improvement that has happened in all of our products is more than had happened in the previous, 50, 60, 70 odd years. And so the scale enables you to invest and build scale even in your technology, research, development, the equipment that you put in. Because some of the equipment that you have, which is the best in class, also comes with fairly large output. So if you don't have the scale to be able to, market the product that's produced, again you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do it by just cutting price, because then you don't, the waterfall, in terms of the profitability just isn't in place to keep the business healthy.
Yeah. And you spoke about technology, and I know in your company there's some really innovative products that you guys have sort of put out in the market historically, but also in recent years. One of the things is e-beam technology, and there's, I'm sure in all your product lines there's a lot of innovation, and like you said, what happens is for people like me, you hear of some of the more sort of well-known things in software and things like that, but in a lot of heavy industry there's a tremendous amount of innovation that I would not know about.
Right.
So I want to understand that what are some of the key developments that you think your company has put out in the market, and if you can give me an example where you think that your product or some innovation that you guys have put out in the market is clearly superior to anything that exists otherwise.
So we have a bunch of products, but there's one which is quite interesting and can touch everybody's lives in a way, because it can go into every single installation home. Today you can't have any installation without having an electric plug, right? Whether you're sitting in a car, whether you're sitting in a train, in a plane. So we have a house wire which is called APAR Anushakti. The name Anushakti comes actually from, it's atomic. And what the electron beam does is that it's essentially a small cyclotron. So it's a high, like a particle accelerator. So it accelerates these electrons to create a beam. And then as the beam falls on a polymer, it cross-links the polymer. And once the polymer is cross-linked, it gets its final properties. So in this case, what is differentiating this APAR Anushakti wire is it's melt resistant, so it's almost short circuit free. Short circuits happen when two naked wires touch each other. It's as simple as that. So it doesn't melt. Secondly, it can carry 50% more power than the conventional wire. Today you wire a house and you don't know what you're going to actually, what electrical appliances you're going to use and how much power you're going to draw. Tomorrow you'll have a robot in there. The robot has a motor, to move around and stuff. And he's going to draw much more power than just charging a mobile phone, for example. So you don't exactly know how much power will be drawn. And thirdly, the life on this wire is 50 years. Guaranteed 50-year life. Because the basic technology that we've used for this, we also use for manufacturing wires for nuclear power plants, for submarines and warships, used for locomotives, the wiring in locomotives. So the polymer compounding technology, which we've got the IP for, we've developed it ourselves, is used in these Anushakti wires. So basically you wire your house up once, and for the next 50 years you can forget about any problems with respect to that. So that's like one innovative product which we are now trying to market through distribution channels, and it's been quite successfully received.
Yeah, and the product you're talking about, Anushakti, of course, I think it's been maybe a year or so where Sonu Sood was brought on as a brand ambassador.
Yes.
And there's been this clear push towards, I don't want to call it a B2C, but less of a B2B product and market.
So I think these are like two almost mutually exclusive verticals, where when you try to grow the B2C part of the business, we have a completely separate team. It needs a different type of mindset and a different skill set, to go in and sell product, through a distribution setup. But there are a whole lot of other cables also going through the same channel. They're not necessarily as technically advanced, but the whole package can be provided. We continue to focus on our B2B side because I think there's so much innovation that's still out there and can be applied, in the businesses that we have. Like you take, for example, EVs, electric vehicles coming up. Now you need a charger set that's in place. And you need a harness for it. It's a solution. So you have a wire, you have connectors on either side, and so one which gets plugged into the car, and it's in the form of a harness, because you don't want to buy the wire separately and a frame separately. It's a finished product. So we've developed the cable. We've tied up with a connector manufacturer. Sooner or later we make the connectors ourselves. And here you go. We have a harness that's going into guys who are now supplying this for electric vehicle charging.
So that's an important development, I think, at APAR, which is you're going from saying, okay, here's an individual product, to saying here is a 360 solution that we can offer. So do you think that is an important push from a business angle, where you can add, because you're adding so much more value to your customer, that there is a very tangible impact on your financials? Is that how you think about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if it's fundamentally playing the role of a doctor, when you're solving somebody's problem or meeting somebody's need, then the value is much higher than if you're just supplying a commodity in it. So in this particular case, if you take APAR Anushakti, there is a safety angle to it, there is a capacity angle to it, and there's a life angle to it. So when there are tangible benefits, there's another product line that our conductor division has been developing, which are what are called HTLS, or high efficiency conductors. Now, when you've got power coming into cities, the right of way that you have is restricted. You just have one set of towers. You can't build a parallel line. There's just no space. You take Mumbai, for example, you'll see these towers which are there, coming in. For our offices in Chembur, from my office window I can see the power lines coming in. We've reconducted those lines. So you've got these towers which are in place. There is no additional right of way that's possible. Power consumption in Mumbai going up 5-7% a year. And EVs come in and start getting mandated. BST buses switching to power. The taxis will to electricity. Your taxis going electric, metro rail, and the underground metro, the overhead metro, all electrical. So basically, if you want to reduce emissions in a highly concentrated area, you've got to go to a zero emission solution. The zero emission solution is driven by electricity because it has no emission. So you need all this extra power coming into a city, no right of way. So what do? Either you go underground, which is a very expensive proposition, with more challenges on right of way, or you design a new conductor that runs on the existing structure, maintaining all the properties. So it can carry, it doesn't have a sag which is more. That's why it's HTLS, low sag. So so that's a solution which you can design with the utility, and depending on the amount of money they want to spend and the amount of power that they want to transfer, the ampacity that they want on the line, you can go from 15% higher to 300% higher. So now the solution that we would offer is you'd sit with the utility, understand the structure, understand the sag, understand the budget that they have, how much power do they want to transfer, and then if you look at the famous engineering thing, theory of constraints, you put all these constraints in there, and you design an appropriate system. So that is much more valuable to a customer than saying, okay, here is my HTLS wire. So what we are finding is that, as you have more innovative products, you need to convert those innovative products into a solution that the customer can use on a turnkey basis.
Yeah. So I want to understand this dynamic with customers a little more. How important, or is it possible in your mind that you can preempt what a customer needs and innovate in advance? Or is it because of the nature of the business and because everything has to be so specific to an individual requirement that the sort of requirement has to come from a customer where they knock on your door and say, look, this is what we need, and then so what I'm trying to understand is the time frame within which all this happens.
So I think there's a combination of both. One important aspect is it's just not a bank that needs to have a KYC. Every business needs to have a KYC, know your customer. So we encourage all our business managers to spend time with customers and understand the trends and trajectories. Because when their need comes up, it just doesn't come up necessarily overnight, especially when it's strategic in nature. There's a lot of thinking that goes. So once you build a trust relationship with the customer, they're ready to bring you in very early in their thought and design process, because they see you as one of the strategic partners in terms of building their future. So I think that's something that we really invested in over the last 60 plus years. In addition to that, you also have customers calling and saying, "Hey, I have this problem, can you solve it?"
Yeah.
Or "I have this requirement, do you have a product that can meet it?"
Yeah.
Or in many cases, they are buying from another supplier, and they want to diversify their supplier base, or they want to have a redesigned or a less expensive product. So they come and approach us. So it's a combination of both.
When I look at your product line, especially cables, conductors, I mean all of them, but I think particularly in those two product lines, the mission criticality of your products and solutions that you offer customers, and especially when you think about the kind of industries in which they're going, right? They're going in the most important: power, public transport, like you said, naval ships. I mean, so the mission criticality and they may not, for example, in a ship, it may not be actively used for 30 years and then overnight it may be used in an emergency. So there has to be that complete confidence of the customer that whenever I need it, the product will perform as per my requirement.
Absolutely.
And obviously a large part of that eventually boils down to the quality that you produce. So what have been over the years, what lessons have you learned in ensuring that your product is best in quality? I don't just mean in terms of you doing your best, but ensuring that you are competing and hopefully out-competing people globally.
So, quality benchmarking and creating a quality focused culture in the company is very important. And it's got to be a movement. Gone are the days where you can just test product. Testing a product is critical. But just by testing product doesn't mean that you're going to always consistently produce a good product, because the nature of our products is that we produce it in mass quantity and you can't test it actually. We produce thousands of kilometers of conductors a day. You're producing thousands of kilometers worth of cables in a day of all different varieties. So we run quality programs. So you start off with 5S and Kaizen, at the lowest level, at a micro level. But then we run Six Sigma quality programs across, because Six Sigma we believe is the most suitable for our type of products, which is produced in very large quantities. So Six Sigma means that you have less than 3.4 defects per million opportunities, and not necessarily that all our products have reached that stage. But once you cross 4.5 Sigma, you are at a level where your quality is actually very good. It's very reliable. We also lay a lot of emphasis in terms of in-process quality checking and process quality, because you're producing, as I said, high speeds, big lengths. We've implemented now, and I won't say implement, we're in the process of implementing a 4.0, Industry 4.0, that enables you to get online, measurements. Not only do you see the uptime of machines and stuff, which helps on the productivity side, but you can hook it up so that all your critical to quality parameters are tracked 24/7. And then you can dashboard them, to show which periods of time they've gone out of spec, or they've been running at the periphery of, what you would have expected in terms of the range, etc. So there's a lot of technology that you can also implement in process for maintaining quality. But today, the cost of failure is very, very high. And especially in systems like ours, if a wire line creates a problem, then the cost of de-stringing it and it's gone to some, and these are in remote places. Imagine if it's gone to a remote location in the United States, the Indian company having to then organize for that to be de-strung and then to be strung again. So you just need it first time right.
Yeah, there's very little margin for error for a number of reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so one of the interesting things that you spoke about was, and especially in recent times when you think of ESG and the focus on renewable power, your company plays a critical role in that business as well. What I want to understand is, within let's say, non-traditional power sources. So, not
Right.
traditional, I mean, whether it's solar, wind, nuclear, whatever it is there for each of those types? Are there different sets of products?
Absolutely.
And how do you and so I also want to get your sense in terms of if you look at it from the power production point of view. In the context of your products, do you think that solar or wind or nuclear has an advantage over the others?
So the advantage or disadvantage. See, fundamentally all these three sources are low emission or zero emission. There is no emission when you have solar. There is no emission when you have wind. There is no emissions in the air that you have under nuclear. There is some nuclear waste which you need to handle. There's a very high level of safety that's required in a nuclear reactor or a nuclear power plant, but there is no emissions that you're talking about. So today the world has, these greenhouse effect, all this, there's just the air is too polluted all over the place. Ozone layer gone, there's a lot of issues. So there's no choice. Better or not better, you've got to go down this path. Fortunately, the world leadership has gotten together and set targets for, individual countries have come up, giving their own targets of renewable energy that they want to bring in. So I think this is an area which is going to grow for the next few decades. You'll have developed countries, probably completing their programs within a decade, but then you have the rest of the world, which is still doesn't have the infrastructure. But the power consumptions are going to grow, and they have the opportunity today to then start off by putting in renewable sources of energy, which is what is being incentivized. So you've got different. So at the front end, you have different products. So for example, you take a solar installation, we are the largest producer of string cables in the country, which is the cables that connect the panels, solar panels. Then you have a separate cable that takes you from there, from that inverter box or whatever, down to the electrical panel, then from the electrical panel to the substation. And then the substation connects either through a high voltage cable solution or most likely a conductor solution. Again, in that substation there is a transformer. Because the electricity is generated at a particular voltage, it needs to be then stepped up for transmission. There again, you need transformer oil that goes into the transformer. So we basically are playing, in the entire end to end, of the electrical. Once the power is generated in a panel, the whole distribution and transmission of that. If you take a windmill, there's a separate cable that goes into the windmill, into the tower. We are the largest producer of that cable in the country. And we export that cable because most of the players are global players, in that area. So again, you have a unique product over there, but then once the cable comes out, the solution then is similar type of cable to substation, and then from there going out. Nuclear power plant is a lot more complex because it has a huge amount of instrumentation and control cables. A lot of instruments, for safety, for measurements, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we are one of the largest suppliers of cables into the nuclear side also. So it's something that we've done by design. By knowing that the world is moving in that direction, we've put in our R&D rupees, and built products.
Yeah, nuclear is particularly interesting to me because, like you said, the main concern with nuclear is the safety aspect, not the ability to produce the power you need. But there's been tremendous advancement on the nuclear power plant design side, which has made it far safer than it was, say, 50 years back.
And they're working on different size formats because the problem with solar and wind is that it's not good as a base power source. See, solar is available for 5 hours in a day. Even in a country like India, which is a very sunny country, 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock is when you basically produce the power. Before 10 a.m. it's less. After 3 p.m. it's also less. So 5 hours is the peak generation. Today battery solutions are still not there at the moment. Wind is a bit complementary to solar. In the nights or when the monsoon is on in India, very little solar generation, but the wind is much more during that period. So you get a lot of wind generation there. So the two are complementary, but they don't run 24/7. A nuclear plant can run 24/7 and can be adjusted in terms of the power load that it is supposed to give. So you will see in a country, for example, the summertime power consumption is very high. Everybody wants the air conditioner on. Even at night, everyone wants the AC on. Whereas you come to December, January, February, even in Mumbai, there are nights where you don't need the AC. You're happy to have the window open or whatever, you know. So as the fluctuation happens, solar wind not capable of taking care of it. You need nuclear, you need hydro, you need some of these other things which can provide the base load. So all of these sources of power are going to exist. What is going to be very interesting is the conversion of this, you know, into storage. It can either be in the form of batteries, it can be in the form of hydrogen, it can, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. And I'm sure even as the world moves in that, you would play some role in that storage process.
Well, the storage is a totally different technology, but even in batteries, for example, again you need wires. You know, we make a range of wires for batteries.
Right. So, especially in recent years, the world is constantly learning the importance of not being necessarily reliant on other countries for mission critical components. And for instance, there was a semiconductor issue not some time ago globally. Right. So in that space, is there something particular APAR does, if it's not necessarily manufacturing semiconductors, but somehow involved in that space?
Not really.
But is there a specific reason? Is it just it's a completely different world?
It's a completely different world. You get into semiconductors. In fact, I've done my engineering in VLSI design, so I have a little idea in terms of that. But you know, from 1989 to today, it's gone through like multiple generations of improvement, especially in terms of the concentration of, you know, the nanometer technology that's there, you know, in the lithography. That is like leapfrog. But it's a totally different world there. We are happy focusing on what we do best.
Yeah.
You know, and today what's happening is that there was a time in India where companies spread themselves thin. They wanted to be in a lot of different businesses. And probably it was driven from the fact that if you got an industrial license, that was a kind of license for you to survive and make money in this country. After the liberalization has happened, building technology expertise, domain expertise is most important. So rather than do 10 different things, where in all three businesses have a runway for you to, you know, sort of grow, and you know, you can have larger and larger planes taking off from there. So, you know, why play around? All markets are growing all around the world for these products. So we're just highly focused on our product lines.
Yeah, it's interesting focus. So Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, when they first met, and they famously, they didn't really want to meet, but they ended up spending 10 hours together. And one of the questions they asked each other is, if you had to pick one thing that separates the good from the very best business leaders, what would you think it would be? And they both said the same thing, which was focus. So it's interesting, like you said, a lot of businesses, I'm not just on your industry, I'm saying you look across.
So we have a little saying in our company that you will find something only when you are looking for it. So, you know, when you are looking for a solution to a problem that your customer has or a need that they have, you will ultimately find it. But how many things are you going to be able to look for at a time, right? So prioritizing, focusing, you know, is a very important thing. And today, resources are very expensive. I mean, in the last few years, if you see, it's just not equipment, but, you know, cost of salary, wage, you know, all those things. Now, cost of money today, with the interest rates going up, resource allocation is probably one of the most important things for a business leader to do, you know, to set the priorities, make sure that you're focused to deliver. So I think that's something at least that we are obsessed with. Yeah. And we don't want to change that, at least not in the foreseeable future.
So, Kushal, there's one thing I want to end with, which is again take you back to your father. And you spent many years, I mean obviously personally, but also many years working with him. So when you think of Dr. Desai, the entrepreneur, what are one or two key lessons that you think you learned from him?
So actually, you know, the biggest takeaway that I have had, and I think my brother Chaitanya, who's worked even more with my dad, you know, one-on-one, is that, you know, he was really good in balancing different aspects within the business and his personal life. So he was a follower of Lord Krishna. He was a Vedantic scholar, so he studied the scriptures thoroughly. And of them, the one that he used to keep saying is a manual, which kind of gives you the best instructions and information in terms of, or I would say not instruction, but guidelines on a day-to-day basis, the Bhagavad Gita. So he had that at the heart of his activities in the way in which his activities were dovetailed and guided. So one of the aspects that he really managed to balance well is spirituality and business. And you often think that the two of them are disconnected, but they're actually very interconnected. Because when you have that outlook, everything changes in terms of the way you look at trusteeship. Your focus on building an institution because you realize that you're here only temporarily. So if you want a legacy to continue, the culture becomes very important, And if you start living it, then that's the best example, right? You're walking the talk. So I think the biggest takeaway was that. In addition to that, just from more of an entrepreneurial aspect, he's a very intuitive person, So once he'd do a lot of study, just basically scholastic, doing a PhD, and stuff like that, and then doing these Vedantic studies and things. But once he was convinced, he used to always say that luck favors the brave. So once you've got yourself convinced that this is the path to go, then you've got to open your chest and take that risk, that calculated risk. And he never shied away from that, So that's many times in the trajectory of APAR, we had to invest in products, invest in a market. See, there was a big stigma of manufacturing in India. Today it's a different ballgame. But when we started venturing out, it was pre-2000. Where basically if you send an email saying APAR Industries from India, that mail was deleted. Or if you wrote a letter or sent a brochure, it was thrown in the dustbin. Because India just had a stigma around quality, ethics. There was just nothing right that people felt about Indian businesses. The software industry played a role, but I think companies like us on the electrical side had a parallel track. So if you see, most of the great Indian software companies grew up in that leading up to 2000 and post 2000. So APAR also had its trajectory around the same time, foraying into these overseas markets. So initially it was very difficult, and he was a guy who always believed in looking at the infinite game. When you change the time horizon, everything that you do and everything that you look at changes. So it gives you that ability to invest on a longer term basis, to pursue a goal which may take several months or years to deliver. But I think some of those efforts and some of that learning which he imparted in the company, we are benefiting from it today.
Well, Kushal, this was absolutely fantastic. It was great hearing about all these things. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, interesting questions, Kushal. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope you continue this.
I will do. Thank you so much.